In 1756, Frederick the Great issued an order that seemed almost absurd. He commanded his famine-stricken, skeptical kingdom to plant a strange, distrusted crop. The result? Potatoes began fueling a transformation no army or treaty could achieve, turning starving Prussia into a superpower and setting the stage for modern Germany. But how did an unwanted tuber outmaneuver armies, empires, and even death itself? In March 1756, his circular reached the officials of Silesia with the sharp edge of royal will. Every district administrator, every pastor, every civil servant was ordered to see that potatoes, those unfamiliar starchy roots, were planted that spring. The king's language was not subtle. Potatoes were to be sown as a very nutritious food, especially for the poor, so that precious grain could be saved or sold. Landowners were told they would profit if they grew this earth growth and brought it to market. For villages without seed, the order was clear: get potatoes from wherever you could. The villagers did not greet this new crop with gratitude. In Prussian fields, tradition ran deep, grain was honest, bread was sacred, and anything that grew hidden beneath the soil seemed suspect. Whispers spread that potatoes might be unclean, even dangerous. In later legend, peasants called them devil's apples, a fitting name for something so strange it was best left to witches or the desperate. Some sermons warned that what grew in darkness could not be trusted on the table. Frederick's officials found themselves facing not just stubbornness, but outright ridicule. Stories traveled of farmers refusing to plant potatoes, claiming not even the dogs would eat them. The king's answer was relentless: more decrees, more pressure, and, as the years passed, a campaign that reached into every parish. According to a tale that would later become famous, Frederick tried a new tactic. He had his royal fields planted with potatoes and ringed them with guards by day, making the crop appear precious. At night, the guards vanished, and the villagers, convinced of the crop's value, stole the tubers to plant in their own plots. Historians now call this story a beautiful legend, but it endures as a symbol of the clash between royal ambition and rural suspicion. The king's experiment had begun, but the real harvest would take years and more than a few acts of stubborn defiance. Pastors across Prussia received new instructions. They were to keep a watchful eye on their congregations, not just for spiritual matters, but for potatoes. Each spring and autumn parish returns began to include reports on potato fields, how many acres, which families, and whether the crop had survived frost or blight. District officials compiled these records and sent them up the administrative chain to Berlin. In some provinces, the numbers barely budged at first, but by the late 1760s, a slow pattern appeared. Reports from Silesia and Pomerania described scattered plots where potatoes had taken root, sometimes on land too poor for rye or wheat. A few landowners, curious or pragmatic, set aside strips for the new crop. When a hard year came and grain failed, these fields drew notice. Parish registers from the 1770s reveal a quiet expansion. What started as isolated patches became rows, then broad strips along the village edges. The acreage planted with potatoes crept upward in the provincial tallies, especially in districts hit by hunger. Officials noted fewer complaints of empty cellars and bad years. Pastors, once skeptical, recorded the tuber's role in keeping the poorest families fed through winter. By the end of Frederick's reign, the potato was no longer a curiosity. It had become a regular entry in the ledgers of Prussian agriculture, tracked and measured by the very officials who once doubted its worth. The king's experiment, enforced from the pulpit and the counting house, was slowly taking hold in the fields. Potato fields began to reshape the arithmetic of survival in Prussia. On the same patch of sandy soil where rye or wheat might barely feed 2 or 3 people for a year, potatoes could sustain 6. Parish registers and estate ledgers from the late 18th century quietly record a new pattern: fewer deaths in hungry seasons, larger families, and a swelling number of baptisms in villages where potato plots had spread. By 1786, Prussia's population had doubled since Frederick's accession, rising from roughly 2.4 million to nearly 5 million. This demographic surge was not just numbers on a page. It filled barracks and workshops, and it changed the very composition of the army. Conscription records from the Bundesarchiv reveal a subtle but steady trend. Recruits from potato-growing regions began to stand taller, averaging several centimeters more than their predecessors just a generation before. Height, long a silent measure of childhood nutrition, became a living record of the calories that now came from beneath the earth. Fewer young men were rejected for frailty or stunted growth, and the army's ranks swelled with broader-shouldered, sturdier conscripts. On campaign, the potato's advantage was more than theoretical. In the hard years of the Napoleonic Wars, Prussian quartermasters noted that while grain fields could be burned by retreating armies, potatoes survived underground. Campaign diaries from 1813 tell of soldiers digging for tubers in frost-hardened fields outside Leipzig, boiling them over campfires when bread was scarce. The resilience of this simple crop helped keep regiments moving when others faltered from hunger. In the ledger of war and peace, potatoes had quietly tilted the balance, 1 acre at a time. In a laboratory in Gießen, glassware clinked as Justus von Liebig scribbled notes that would change how Germans understood food. By the 1840s, Liebig's chemical analysis revealed that potatoes delivered more than just calories. They brought vitamin C, essential minerals, and a nearly complete set of amino acids. Unlike wheat, potatoes could keep scurvy at bay and sustain workers through the long, hungry months. Liebig's findings landed in agricultural manuals and factory ledgers, reframing potatoes from peasant fare to scientific staple. Farmers soon realized that a potato field needed far less labor than a field of rye. With fewer hands tied up in planting and harvesting, rural families sent sons and daughters to the city. Berlin's population, just 170,000 at the start of the century, swelled to over 800,000 by 1870. Potato surpluses made this migration possible, filling city markets and factory canteens with cheap, filling food. At the K.R. Rupp Steelworks in Essen, workers lined up for steaming bowls of potatoes, sometimes boiled, sometimes mashed, always present. Company doctors noted that a diet rich in potatoes gave laborers the stamina for 12-hour and 14-hour shifts. Starch from these same tubers became the backbone of the textile and paper industries, feeding the machines that powered German industry. Between 1830 and 1870, German industrial output multiplied several times over. Quartermasters in Bismarck's armies packed dried potatoes for the field, knowing they would last through months of campaigning. By 1871, the new German Empire could reliably feed 41 million people. From Liebig's laboratory bench to the factory floor and the battlefield, the potato had become the quiet engine behind a nation's rise. In the winter of 1916, the potato, once Prussia's shield against famine, vanished from German tables. Allied blockades cut off fertilizer and food imports, and heavy rains rotted the potato crop in the fields. Families lined up for hours with ration cards, only to receive turnips, the last edible root left in storage. Diaries from Berlin described children fainting in school, mothers boiling watery turnip soup, and city hospitals filling with the weak and malnourished. Municipal death registers recorded an estimated 750,000 civilian deaths from hunger and disease during the so-called turnip winter. Yet, even as hunger spread, the country's fields would soon recover, producing 50 million tons of potatoes annually by the 1920s. Out of these hungry years, new chemical giants, BASF and Bayer, rose, their origins tied to the struggle to turn roots and starch into survival. Potatoes never left the German table. After the devastation of war, fields across the country once again filled with rows of tubers. By the 1950s, potato harvests topped 10 million tons each year, a level Germany still maintains today. In city markets and village kitchens, potatoes reasserted themselves as the foundation of everyday meals, boiled, mashed, or fried. In 1949, a Berlin street vendor named Herta Heuer stirred up a new tradition, currywurst, a simple sausage doused in spicy ketchup and served with a heap of fries. The dish spread quickly, from factory gates to football stadiums, and now Germans eat around 800 million currywurst every year. Whether in the hands of a farmer or a late-night commuter, the potato remains a quiet constant, fueling work, celebration, and the routines of modern life. Even now, Germany's strength grows from the ground up. Food security is national security. As climate change strains global harvests, the lesson stands: a single crop can tip the balance of history. The real power isn't always on the throne. It's what feeds the nation. What do you think?